Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed, we do. Lots of interesting things to get into this morning. We're going to start with the very latest polls. We are actually 99 days out from the election.
Wow.
Kind of crazy, right?
That is crazy. Oh
So we've got a bunch of looks at like just the horse race, the Battleground polls, favorability, top issues, all of that stuff we're going to dig in. We also have Kamala's first ad that she is up with using a Beyonce song that she got permission to use.
Someone say freedom, but
We're going to play and see if we get dinged on YouTube. So taking a little bit of a risk with that one this morning. We're also taking a look at the Veep stakes for Kamala Harris. A clearer picture emerging of what she may be looking for and who the top contenders are. So we're going deep on this one. Our producers did a fantastic job pulling together mashups of each of the top contenders so we can show you who they are and what we know about them and who may be leading that Veep stakes fight. We've also got new, very interesting behind-the-scenes reported details about Trump courting RFK Jr., and what exactly the play is there. So we'll bring you that. We've also got even more revelations about Secret Service failures with regard to that attempted assassination of Donald Trump. I always want to say attempted assassination attempt for some reason. Anyway, massive communication failures and something that they've known about for like literally over a decade that apparently hasn't been fixed. The SWAT team, the local SWAT team that was there on the ground is also speaking out. So we'll bring you all of that. And also a bombshell story, international story, two major cartel figures now brought down, arrested, apprehended here in the US. The behind the scenes of this is crazy. Seems like some sort of a soap opera betrayal, although I wouldn't believe everything that's coming out about this at this point.
There will be a movie 5 years from now with all the actual details, but for now, this is absolutely nuts. As many other bros online, I have a deep fascination with the Mexican drug cartel. So when I saw this news, I was actually speechless. I was like, I cannot believe they got him. And then I'm like, well, did they? That's the real question.
Well, because the deal with El Mayo is like, his whole thing is like he's never set foot in prison,
Nobody even knew what he looked like. Even the photo, everyone was like, is this really him? Yeah, I mean, I think the photos of him, it was very, very strange. And then the fact that Chapo Jr. was involved, and he's a young man and allegedly struck a deal with the government. I mean, like I said, this is straight up out of like Narcos season 4. So this is gonna be, it's fascinating to see what the initial thing is gonna be. And I'm really hoping this one goes to trial because we learned a lot during the El Chapo trial and the government will actually have to give us some facts. Last time around, we learned so much about the inner workings of the drug cartels, the connection to the Mexican government. Allegedly, the Mexican government this time around didn't even know this was all going down. So there's big questions there. So it's interesting.
All right, so we'll get into all of that, but let's go ahead and start with those polls.
Yes, let's start with the polls. And thank you to all of our premium members, by the way. We have some big news coming, so stay tuned for that. Let's go ahead and begin with the Wall Street Journal. This one really was the one that shook the political landscape and put it up there on the screen. And it actually just highlights how much things have really changed. So what you can see in front of you is if the general election were held today, for whom would you have voted? Originally, we had Trump and Biden, and you can just see the massive swing between Joe Biden, who was at 42% in July 1st in the Wall Street Journal poll, and you had Donald Trump at some 49%. But Harris effectively has erased the entire Trump lead and is essentially tied within the margin of error in this latest poll at 49 to 47. You should always, of course, incorporate that margin of error of roughly 3.1% to then show you that this is an effective tie. What's also fascinating, and this is, I think, the story of the Kamala changeout. Are you enthusiastic about your candidate? Look at that sub 50% figure up until July 2nd with Joe Biden. Now you have almost 80% of Democrats who are saying that they are enthusiastic about their candidate. You see the enthusiasm massively spike amongst independents.
That's interesting.
Republicans, it's also spiked, and that's not actually unexpected given the attempted assassination of Donald Trump, the RNC, and of course, as closer we get to election day, more people are paying attention. But the fundamental story is the change amongst independents, the change amongst Democrats specifically, and to see what that turnout, skyrocketing turnout previously of 2022 will look like in 2024 when Donald Trump is there and on the ballot. So I really think that that is the biggest story of the entire election. And then the favorability rating is one too that we really cannot look away from. Let's go ahead and put the next one, please, up on the screen, because it also tells that story. Here we have from the Financial Times. They did a fantastic job of going through and aggregating a lot of favorability data. This is from actually multiple polls that they've aggregated. And you have Trump's, favorability rating, which was increasing, but it was still, underwater. It was roughly around like minus 11%. Lately, this is with the attempted assassination. Previously, he used to go pretty significantly. But Biden was, in the doldrums, I guess, of favorability rating. Things were just getting worse and worse for him all throughout his presidency, but especially after the disastrous debate performance. Just look at the hockey stick that we have here with Kamala Harris, who, let's be honest, we covered this a million times. She's one of the most least popular vice presidents in modern history. Nobody really cared about her. She wasn't having even a third look or whatever from Democrats. But the anointing of her and giving just an alternative to Donald Trump that can speak literally and prosecute a very basic case against Trump that the most normie Democratic mayor in the country could, has really invigorated Democrats and has skyrocketed her favorability. And I think that this is one of those where the contrast of the aging, inept, basically dying Biden to somebody who is just not even a particularly talented politician, but nonetheless somebody who's living and breathing, that has just breathed life into the Democratic base in a way that I have not seen, I think, ever in modern politics.
I mean, I'm not going to say Obama-esque, but there is a little bit of that vibe of excitement and
fired up, ready to go.
Yeah, and it really is, the contrast is so important there because Biden set the bar below the floor.
Exactly.
So when you see her capably, and she does this very well, we should give her due, when she's on the stump and she's delivering a speech, she's very effective. She hasn't had to do any of the things yet that have really caused her trouble in the past. She hasn't sat for a difficult interview. She obviously hasn't done a debate versus Donald Trump yet. Those are the things that were more challenging for her in the past. But up there on the stump in front of a cheering, adoring audience, she has a swagger right now that has really come across. And I think it is true, and we predicted this ahead of time, that just the fact that people don't feel doomed to the death march and the matchup that everyone was dreading, that there's some new life and vitality injected into this race has caused her favorability ratings to skyrocket. And it also just shows that part of the problem for her was being tied down by the Biden administration, feeling, her favorability was really being dragged down by how unpopular the whole administration was. So that was the thing that really blew me away, because we should be honest about where the polls are. They still show, either it's tied or Trump still has a bit of an edge. She really has brought the race back to where it was maybe a few months ago before Biden started having more and more precipitous decline and his position really started to dramatically erode. So it's not like she's where Biden was last time in 2020. This time last time, in 2020, Biden was up by 9 points in these type of polls.
Yeah. All right.
So let's just be clear about where the race stands today. But what has been most shocking to me is just the dramatic turnaround in her favorability rating. And one of the things that I've been thinking about, Saagar, is when it was Biden, it was very clear who the change candidate was.
Yes, that's
and
right.
It was not Joe Biden. It was Donald Trump. Now, with Kamala Harris, she has, because she is different and she's a comparative fresh face and all of those sorts of things, she has as much of a claim on being the change candidate in what I think is likely a change election as Donald Trump does. That alone has completely reset the race. With regard to that Wall Street Journal poll, and we're going to talk about more about RFK Jr. and his role and how he fits into all of this in the C block. But when you make it the five-way race, when you include him and Jill Stein and Cornel West, which they should include the Libertarian candidate too. I don't know why they're not doing that.
Yeah, it's very odd that they did not.
Yeah, because he'll be on more ballots than Cornel West. Anyway, putting that aside, Harris very clearly at this point is benefiting more from having RFK Jr. in the race than Trump is. So in the five-way race, she actually, still within the margin of error, but she actually edges out Trump 45-44. So in the overall, it's Trump 49-47, also within the margin of error. In the five-way, it's 45-44, which is also very important to note here. But just a complete reset of the entire matchup like that. It's incredible to see.
It is shocking, and but I mean, as you said, let's make sure we present a realistic picture. We have the Fox News Battleground polls. We can put this up there on the screen, and what we see in the Battleground is that if we look at Pennsylvania, we have effectively a tie at 49-49. In Michigan, 49-49. In Wisconsin, it actually shows Trump up by 1, 50-49. Minnesota is kind of the most interesting, where you have 52-46. And we'll bring that up, I think, in the VP section, because it could possibly change how Kamala Harris is thinking about who she's going to pick and what that would look like. I would also say on the issues, there are several issues which, considering at least what people self-report, what is most important, that is going to significantly, I think, tilt things in the Republican direction, although not as much of a slam dunk as it previously was. Let's go to the next one, please. This shows what issue is the most important in deciding your vote. Number 1 is going to be economy or inflation. These are for undecided voters. Number 2 is going to be the, quote, candidate's character or competence. 3 is immigration. 4 is foreign policy. 5 is abortion. And 6 is state of democracy and corruption. So abortion and democracy are the only 2 issues where there's a massive clear edge for Kamala Harris. I believe Kamala Harris has some plus 15% or whatever favorability with respect to Donald Trump in some head-to-head polling. But on immigration and foreign policy less so, but immigration especially, Trump has the leading edge. And on economy and inflation, you actually see a pretty significant edge for Donald Trump. A lot of that is going to be nostalgia from the last time around, but I will say this, and I'm sure you recall, in 2020, we would always ask the Trump people about the polling. We're like, listen, this is a disaster. This is really bad. And what they always came to us is they said the economy trust for Trump, even at the rock bottom of the COVID pandemic and everything, is that Trump was still always at least tied, if not leading Joe Biden on the economy. And that number became far more predictive of the actual vote number in 2020 than many of these BS polls like, what, they showed Biden up by 17 points or something like that in Wisconsin in October. It's ridiculous. You know, Trump lost it by, let's say, 1%, something like that. And so if we look at that economy figure, and remember, I mean, yes, there's a lot of talk here about enthusiasm, et cetera, but some independents and all those others coming out to vote, if they're breaking on the economy, it's still not the best thing for Kamala Harris right now.
Well, that may be changing, because there's some new numbers out. We didn't pull this. Maybe we can put it in post. This is from Atlas, and they polled on the issues. And she's, in this particular poll, she's tied with Trump on the economy.
I haven't seen a lot
on all of these, who would handle this and that issue better. She's doing way better than Biden on everything across the board, on healthcare, on education, on the economy, which is really interesting that people trust her way more than they do Biden on the economy. And I do think it goes to the fact that people just felt like, this guy, how can I trust him on anything? He's too old to do anything. So why would I think that he's going to be like great for the economy? So, you know, even those numbers are really in flux right now and really shifting. Like I said, this is an Atlas Intel poll that was taken over the course of last week that found her and Trump tied on the economy, which I was pretty shocked to see. Now, again, it's one poll, so we'll see what else comes out with regards to that. But you know, it is remarkable to see how even in the battleground states, because Biden was kind of hanging in there a little bit in the national polls. In the battleground polls, he was just getting destroyed. So even in the Fox News battleground state polls, she's polling even and winning quite clearly in the state of Minnesota. And if you poll their favorability in those states, she has a higher favorability than Trump in the Fox News poll in each of these battleground states. So, you know, she's clearly, there's an energy, there's an excitement. Her team has done, it's the same team as the Biden team, but they just have so much more life and vitality to her. She has so much more life and vitality to her. They've done such a more effective job than they were doing with Biden. Was all this buttoned up, like restoring democracy. Right. And they're just down there like, yeah, this dude's weird and we don't like him.
I would also significantly not underestimate the money advantage, because one of the main things that we were driving Joe Biden out of the race was the fact that the donors basically locked it up. They're like, you're done, we're not donating to you anymore. Kamala raised $200 million in a single week. I believe that breaks the all-time record for the amount of dollars ever spent. I mean, that is alone not something anything that I would discount. And, you know, in a certain way, it's cash that comes at exactly the right time. Statistically, the vast majority of Americans don't pay attention until 3 weeks before Election Day. Some people are beginning to tune in right now. Another thing, and this is one of the caveats for a lot of the polling that people should keep in mind, this is a very, very noisy environment. A lot of people are still making up their minds about Kamala Harris. They don't know what they think about Kamala Harris. They're like, hey, maybe I need to see her in a debate. I need to see her in an interview. I got to read, whatever. You know, there's a lot of change, I think, in the way that people could view her. So it could go down. It could go up significantly, too. That's the other thing. And I don't think that we have yet properly priced in the removal of Biden. Biden was a noose around the neck of the Democratic Party, of basically all of the issues, because even whenever it comes down to trust in the economy, you have to factor in, you're like, this guy is so old. Like he's gonna, like he's on the verge of death. And when you think about it, it just colors the way that you look at everything. So it's almost like a different light bulb has come on, and it's a different heuristic that we're all viewing the entire world in, especially for Democratic voters. And actually, I think that's the most significant change for me. Is if we think back to 2020 and why Trump lost, a lot of it came down to not actually just getting the basic mail-in ballots of like boomer Republicans who didn't show up to vote on Election Day. Democrats love to, statistically, especially the older ones, they vote more than everybody else. And so to get them, let's say their enthusiasm has gone from 50 to 100, which effectively is where it is. Let's say that factors, you know, a couple 10,000 more votes in every swing state. That's it. That's the margin of victory. You don't even have to convince anybody. You can just drive out normal people who voted for Obama in 2012 and you can easily clock this entire thing. That is a huge, huge change that a lot of people are not, at least the smart Republicans I've seen are grappling with this. They're like, hey, this enthusiasm, this is a major problem. Because the gap between MAGA, which was always turned up to like 80, probably now at 100, versus, you know, 85 Democrats, where previous was on the floor around 20s. That is the biggest X factor, I think, right now.
No doubt about it. And I mean, as much as I object on principle to these like white affinity groups that are white dudes for Kamala and white women for Kamala and all this stuff, the numbers they're getting on these organizing calls are insane. I mean, the white women one had like, what, 150,000 people?
It was the biggest Zoom call in all of history. I believe the white dudes for Kamala Harris has like 112,000. Yeah, I mean, look, I agree with you. Do we really need to balkanize on like X group?
I know.
Kamala, can we just be for Kamala or Trump, please? Is that too much to ask?
Well, apparently imagine if there was like a white dude for Trump, the way people would feel about that. Anyway, putting that aside, the energy is clearly real because, I mean, they did the black women for Kamala, it was like 50,000. The black men for Kamala, it was like 50,000 people on these calls raising millions of dollars. And these are your people who are gonna phone bank and they're gonna door knock and they're gonna kick in their $10 a month or whatever. None of it was happening for Joe Biden. The last thing I'll say before we can move on to Kamala's first ad, because it kind of it's kind of a good segue to this. One thing that was really important about that David Leonhardt tweet thread that we put up before is he's saying, look, you guys are talking all about democracy. Kamala has changed the rhetoric she's using about the like democracies on the ballot. It's less, you know, existential and pro-clutchy and more like these are a bunch of weird freaks who want to take your stuff away. But she's still primarily focused on that. And what he's pointing out is, listen, the people who feel like that's their number one thing, they're already with you, right? The Democratic base now, they are locked in. They're with you. You're good there, girl. Yeah. Where you need to focus is on economics. Funny, Bernie Sanders made very similar comments to that and once again got accused of being sexist.
Did he really?
For saying that.
I didn't see this.
Yeah, I mean, it's insane because he said very similar things when it was Joe Biden. He was like, we need to talk about going after the millionaires and billionaires, you know, his whole thing. This is his whole thing. And if you don't, you're not going to win. He said something similar about Kamala Harris and all these, oh, he's just sexist. He doesn't think a woman can win, et cetera, et cetera. No, he's 100% correct. If you want to win, you need to actually run on an affirmative economic agenda, like a very clear one. Just a few things that you're going to do that separate you from the Republican economic agenda. And if you don't, he's absolutely right that you have a great chance of losing the election if you aren't focused on the issues that undecided voters care the most about. That parlays into the messaging. That obviously parlays into the VP pick. I will tell you, I think Tim Walz does a fantastic job messaging on middle class and working class economics. But in any case, I think the numbers are really clear that if she actually wants to win, which right now today, given the poll numbers, I would still give the edge to Donald Trump, because we know that the polls typically when he's been on the ballot, now the polls are all over the place these days, but typically when he's on the ballot, they tend to understate his support. I would not feel comfortable with where the polls are today if I was the Democratic Party, if I was Kamala Harris. If you actually want to win, you need to be clear about an affirmative economic agenda. I think the numbers are really clear on that.
Yeah, no, that's actually very well said. Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.